It doesn't matter to me if you've been a CSM before. You could have been a project manager before. You could have been in sales before. I've hired people from all walks of life. And I think that the thing that I'm trying to distill that I look for is I want to find people who can hunt out the outcome that they have to get to and can build a really solid plan to get there and bring people on the journey. And I think that by finding somebody who can do those things, you've found someone who's a great communicator because they can ask great discovery questions. They can figure out what's that end goal I have to get the customer to in order to renew them. And they've got people bought in to go there with them.
Welcome to Scale Sessions, the podcast that helps revenue leaders like you boost sales and revenue to achieve business growth within the trenches insights.
We can skip the fluff and focus on real-world strategies you can use right away.
Each episode brings you actionable takeaways from sales and revenue leaders navigating growth challenges like you. Let's dive into today's session and scale up your success. Natasha Evans is the VP of Customer Growth at Hook, with extensive experience in CS and driving revenue through renewals and upsells. Having led teams at LinkedIn and SalesLoft, Natasha has a track record of scaling CS operations and aligning them with growth objectives. Natasha, welcome to Scale Sessions. Now,
Thanks.
I'm incredibly nosy, so I always like to poke back right to the start of people's careers. And I see that you actually studied a degree in mathematics. Is that where the revenue and numbers drive came from?
Do you know, I would love to tell you yes, because I feel like that would make a ton of sense, wouldn't it? But no, definitely. I don't think that's where it came from. I think like the background in maths is more like the piece that drove me to CS in terms of like logical and like solving problems and figuring things out for customers. I don't think that that's where the numbers came from. And I don't know, if I think back to like my early stages of my career, I think I was like terrified of that side of things. And I also remember like my first ever job, I was hired like office job. I was hired as a receptionist and I was really scared of the phones. And so I feel like this has just been like a nice development throughout my career where I've kind of come full circle back to like caring about numbers and owning numbers. But if I think early on, like, no, that like revenue side of things, that like confidence to like pick up the phone, ask questions, chase a number was not me in early days. I just happened to have come back to that way.
I love the fact you started as a receptionist because I did too. In some crazy startup. Yeah, It was a temp job. And so you spent nearly 5 years at LinkedIn and then 5 years at SalesLoft. So you've explained a little bit about why you chose LinkedIn. Why then SalesLoft? What appealed to you about that move?
Yeah, so I think I adored life at LinkedIn because the culture was incredible. I felt like I worked with incredibly smart people, and I had spent enough time there to have like learned enough about what I was doing in my space, and I found myself craving a little bit more impact and a little bit more like choice and strategy of my own in terms of how I went about running my team then, because I developed into a manager, and how we went about the types of customer success that we ran. And I don't think that this is true for all large companies, but oftentimes you find in a larger organization that when you're in like first or second line management, you don't always get to set the strategy. The strategy is set at another level, but your job is to execute and to get your team on board and take them on the journey. And that's perfect for first time management. That was wonderful for me. But I find myself being like, but I want to do this kind of CS, and I want to build this kind of team, and I want to build these kinds of resources and these kinds of frameworks. And so when I felt like I was looking for a bit more, I was looking for a company that mirrored that like cultural environment, but was going to give me that space to go build and to go do things. And so it was happy timing that SalesLoft were hiring for their first like CS person on the ground. And it was a hybrid role, like, hey, you need to build up the CS team, but also you need to run a book of business while you do that and whilst you go build it out. But hey, you know, we've done it this way in the US, but we don't necessarily want to do it the exact same way in EMEA. Like, you're going to have the opportunity to go build and to put your stamp on it. And so it felt like the perfect role for me, and ended up being an absolute rocket ship for me and my career in customer success, for sure.
So you were at SalesLoft for nearly 5 years, and you were the first person on the ground then in the UK.
Yes.
And what did you do differently from what they'd set up in the US? Because it sounds like they were really keen for you to adapt it to the local markets.
That's a really good question. I think that we we focused in the early days a lot on scale. So I from early days was like, okay, how do we run even just basic things across the rest of the region that will help a lot of customers? And then my style of CS back then and still now was center it around ROI. What's the customer trying to achieve? Or center it around value. What's the customer trying to achieve? How do you build plans to get there? How do you present that back on a quarterly or a 6 monthly basis to present back value? And so I think that historically they'd been running much more of a like product-led CS in the States. And so this was like a nice evolution into, okay, but how do we lift that up and how do we start to tell good ROI stories and how do we start to do QBRs and success plans and those kinds of things?
So from product-led to more value-led.
Yes, yeah.
It's a really interesting point because I run monthly pavilion dinners and without fail, someone will raise a challenge of like the role of sales versus CS, where's the handover? I think there's still quite a lot of confusion about what CS actually covers. What do you think is the biggest misconception about customer success?
Firstly, I will massively plus one on the confusion. I think we're really missing a bit of identity as a function in terms of like, hey, this is what you do and be proud of it and go stand up, go talk to people about that. And so, yes, I massively agree with you. In terms of misconception, I think that there's still a lot of sales teams, there's a lot of businesses that see us as this. You should be the product expert. And if a customer wants to know how to do something in the platform, that's your job to go do that. And so I think there's still a lot of that evolution to happen from seeing us as this person that should just go train everyone on how to use a platform to here's a function that actually should be advising senior stakeholders on how they set out and how they achieve that path to value or to ROI, leveraging your platform, because that's a totally different conversation. And then I think perhaps the other thing from an outside perspective is misunderstanding the complexity of the role. You have to juggle a lot in customer success. Like there's a ton that comes with that. You get a lot thrown at you. Traditionally it's the kind of role where you're asked to do a lot and maybe you're not the most recognized for your impact on that revenue. And so I still think that there's a lot of work to do in terms of educating just how skilled the best CSMs like have to be and what they do to get to where they get to.
Well, you have to really understand the product, but also really understand the customer and what they need to make sure that you're delivering value while also informing the rest of the business so you can ensure that they become a loyal customer. And, there's often a revenue target there as well. And again, another question that comes up a lot is, should CSMs be responsible for a revenue target?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of that. I think that you talked about this, like understanding the product, understanding the customer. The glue that pulls both of those together is the use case and how you apply one to the other. So like, how do you understand enough about the product and enough about what the customer needs and what they're struggling with to then guide them on the use cases and how they apply your product to go meet their goals. And if they meet their goals, which most of the time are revenue driven or efficiency driven, then not only is that going to unlock extra revenue for their business, but extra revenue for yours. And so why should we not be responsible for that whole life cycle? Like if we're the ones that are influencing that revenue, we're securing it, then yeah, we should own that and we should be held accountable for that number. And so yes, I'm a big fan of CS owning revenue numbers. I myself would only ever go and run a team that had a revenue number held to it, because I think it tons of reasons, but I think it gives us that like gratification at the end of that process that like, yeah, you did all this stuff. And so therefore like go take it home, go close that renewal and go expand that customer. But also it gives you that seat at the table that I think a lot of customer success teams have been really wanting and really missing, because you're showing to the business, this is my team's impact on these business numbers that we're all held to. And so like, yeah, I should be able to talk about product feedback and we should be able to talk about customer experience. So yes, very passionate about that.
It's quite hard balancing out though, isn't it? Because you need to really build trust with the customer and ensure that you're providing them with the best experience, but you're also responsible for generating revenue, renewals, upsells, cross-sells. but you don't want them to think you're there just to sell. I mean, I've had experiences in the past with platforms that I've used where, you have a customer success person who's helping you out, and then a year on, renewal time, a salesperson suddenly appears and you're having a conversation there. How do you get that balance right? Because if you don't have the trust of them, it's much harder to build that loyalty.
Do you know, I was having a conversation today with this wonderful, wonderful chap called Blair, who won CSM of the Year at the Customer Growth Awards. And he said something that really resonated with me. He said that at the start of every customer relationship that he has, he is very clear with them that I am targeted on your success. And so I am really invested in you. Like, let's figure out what are the things that your business cares about, what are the goals that you have to achieve, and how are you measured, how are you held against them, and what's going to get you there, what's going to get you there as a company, but also you there as an individual. And I'm targeted on that. I'm compensated on that as a CSM. And so I'm really invested in that. And so I want to be really upfront about what is it going to take to renew you in 12 months time or 2 years time, and how do we build a path to get there? And I think that there's something really lovely about that level of like honesty and vulnerability, because it sets the tone of like partnership, we're in it together, but also being that open up front about, hey, I want some of our discussion to be, how do I renew you? How do I keep you as a customer in 12 months time? Because then when it comes to that renewal discussion, you're not having to like switch into now I'm a salesperson and I have to close the renewal. But that's been part and parcel of the discussion all along is, of course I want to keep you as a customer. So like, of course we're going to have a discussion about how I renew you in 12 months time. And if you've gotten enough value from what we've done together that you think it's worth expanding, then we should talk about that. And I think like some part of that is, as customer success professionals, is just not shying away from that conversation. And like, it's okay to be in sales, but it's all about the way that you frame it, because you're doing everything with the customer's best interest versus just thinking about how you're hitting a number or a quota at the end of the day.
So important about how you frame it. And I think, another topic that comes up a lot is ICP. So how do you handle it if you're getting customers through that maybe aren't the best fit for your product? So when they talk about, this is my success metrics, do you ever get situations where they're sitting there going, oh, crikey, this is going to be a real challenge? And how do you handle that?
Yeah, I'm sure every CSM has been through that. And I think, maybe sometimes as a CS team, you take on customers that maybe aren't ICP or have been missold or have been sold way more product than they ever will use. And I think there's a couple of things you can do there. Always try and create a plan to do the best you possibly can with that customer. And then your job as a CSM is to execute on that plan. So you do whatever you can to get that customer to the value statement. But your job is also to escalate. Like, escalate to your manager that, hey, I'm letting you know this is the scenario. Here's what I'm going to do about it. So you're showing your level of accountability. But I'm concerned about that right now, that I think that's going to come back to us in 6 months' time or in 9 months' time. And I think as a CSM, your job is to escalate on an individual level. And as a CS leader, your job is to capture themes. Like, if that's happening too frequently, then that's where you need a really good relationship with your sales counterpart to be able to give that feedback, to say, hey, like, we can't be doing these things, or to be able to give feedback to say, I'm not sure that this type of customer that looks and feels this way should be in our ICP, and perhaps we should amend our ICP because this is happening. And I think it's frustrating when you have to wait for the renewal cycle to come through to be able to make that case. And so this is where I think health scores can help do some of that job too, because if you're able to tell a story that says, hey, all these customers that you're bringing in that look and feel like this, look how unhealthy they all are, then that's a very easy narrative back to the rest of the business, whether it's to sales, whether it's to RevOps, to build the case to say, this is not worth us investing our time, because we're spending all of this money bringing them on through the sales process, and there's no way we're going to keep them. So we should be focused elsewhere.
Oh, I have so many questions on this, but my first one would be, you just talked about health metrics.
Yes.
What are your key KPIs for your team?
Yeah. Another hot topic. I try and break KPIs out into two core things. And all of it feeds down from the revenue target. So whether it's GRR or NRR, depends on the business and the team that you're running. But to hit to that revenue target, for me, you need a proactive motion and you need a reactive motion. Proactive motion is like, if all the stars aligned, what should we do with every customer based on whether it's their size, their spend, how they look and feel? What does that great customer journey look like, and why? And then the reactive side is acknowledging that the stars don't always align and everything isn't always perfect, and you have to react to risk. What does that motion look like? And then I build my KPIs off the back of that. So for instance, it might be, okay, well, your end goal is your GRR metric. The things that I think, based on this business, based on the way that the product operates, based on its ease of use, based on all the data I can get my hands on, the things that I think the team should be doing to influence that NRR in the best possible way are, as an example, building a success plan that's aligned to the value they care about, delivering that value back to them on a quarterly basis through a QBR or whatever you want to call it to show that value back. Making sure that you have an executive touch point twice a year so that you're keeping that value story at the top level. So something like that says, this is what that perfect motion looks like for my customers based on the data I can gather and the way that we operate. And so I'm going to set you some KPIs around doing that against every customer, because in theory, if we do that, things are going to go well. But then on the other side of things, I focus more on, okay, well, not everything goes well. And you're always going to have risky accounts. You're always going to have red customers. And so what are we doing in that scenario to really look at, well, what does my business look like? How much red do I have? How does that translate into a forecast? And how far is that forecast off from my NRR target or my GRR target? And then oftentimes what I'm doing is saying, okay, well, whatever I'm off, say I've got 500K to find or 1 million to find, whatever that looks like. How do I then give my team some targets on how much red they're turning to green? So, hey, CSMs, we've got this big target we want to hit our GRR target for the year. We're this far off. I need each of you to go find 2 red accounts or 100K of red ARR and turn it into green, and build me a plan on how you're going to go do that. And of course, then from your health score, it's all built off of product data, subscription data, adoption data, all of that kind of good stuff under that. And so that's how I tend to think about like the motion, and then how I build the KPIs on top of it to make sure that my team can hit their goal.
And you talk about turning the red into the green. Have you seen any commonalities across some of these red accounts? What tactics really work to take them from a red to a green?
I think that there will be 2 facets of tactics. One is that more like operational rhythm. So, hey, are you engaged at that exec level? Do you understand what that exec cares about? If so, does that exec understand still how leveraging your platform will get them to that objective? Because if both of those things are true, then in theory, you should have a really great communication plan, success plan that says, I'm an exec, I understand that I have to hit this goal, and using that solution is the only thing that's going to get me there. So like, hey, whole team that sits underneath me, you all have to be going to do this thing because that's going to get us to this business goal. And so I think there's tactics like that say, hey, if you have those types of conversations, or if you build champions within your organization to deliver messages for you, like these are operational rhythm things that turn accounts from red into green. But then with any health score, you should always be able to understand what's the data point that I need to be leveraging. Like what's the dial that I need to turn that's going to turn this account from red and into green. And so, yeah, cool, I can have executive conversations, I can go and speak to champions, all of that good stuff. But when I look at what makes that account red, how do I understand what that is? And where do I need to move that to go and get that account to green? So then there's oftentimes more tactical things in there. And that's the bit that differs for every business, because it all depends on the makeup of the health score, the things that are driving retention or churn, and all of that good stuff.
So if I'm a CSM, I'm wearing quite a few hats. I've got to be really customer obsessed, but at the same time, I've got to be extremely commercially savvy as well. Excellent communicator, great at empathy. How do you find them, and how do you really determine who you think is going to be great at this as well?
I think, how do you find them? I honestly have not codified that. I'll be totally honest. I am and Becca in our talent team will tell you, I interview a lot of people to find my like perfect CSM. And I think it probably is because, to your point, like I'm expecting high things. Like I want people to be commercially minded and have great comm skills. But I think and so there's no look and shape of a person on a CV that matters to me. When I'm hiring into my team, I'm hiring more for behaviors that I'll talk about in a second. And it doesn't matter to me if you've been a CSM before. You could have been a project manager before. You could have been in sales before. I've hired people from all walks of life. And I think that the thing that I'm trying to like distill that I look for is I want to find people who can hunt out the outcome that they have to get to and can build a really solid plan to get there and bring people on the journey. And I think that by finding somebody who can do those things, you've found someone who's a great communicator because they can ask great discovery questions. They can figure out what's that end goal I have to get the customer to in order to renew them. And they've got people bought in to go there with them. So that's like you've hit the communication piece. They are savvy enough to be able to build out a plan on how you get there. And like a success plan to me is not like a list of actions, got to do training one day, got to do this another day. It's like, what are the tactics? What are the use cases? If we're going to hit this ROI goal for you, how do you need to apply my product to get there? What are the things that we need to do? What are the use cases we need to build? What are the strategies that we need to apply? And so they need to have some kind of either experience or aptitude to pick up the more like project change management side of CS. And then it's like, hey, once you've got there, how do you tell the world that that's the story? And so usually that's a bit of like intuitiveness with data, but again, that's a skill that can be trained. So really that behavior I'm looking for is, I'm a CSM, I own that account. How do I figure out where I have to get that account to? How do I build a solid plan to get there? And how do I take people on that journey to make sure it happens? And it's a really hard thing to interview for.
I'd never really thought about the project management skill set, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Are there any really good interview questions you find help in working out whether they're going to be a good fit?
Yes. So I'm going to share one that's really, really bizarre. But for many years, I asked this question. And actually, you've reminded me because I don't know if I've asked this question on my last bunch of interviews. But I would often ask people, imagine you were successful in getting this role and I've given you your first customer. Your first customer goes live tomorrow. And all you can think about is, how do I tee this customer up in the best possible way? How am I going to make sure that everything I do today and tomorrow gets them to renewal at the end of the day? And so you've just left work, you're walking home, and you find, I'm like laughing at myself as I tell this because it's so embarrassing. You find a genie's lamp on the side of the road. And you rub the side of the lamp, the genie pops out, and the genie's like, hey, Nicola, you're going live with this account tomorrow. You care a lot about the renewal. What's your 3 wishes? What are the 3 things that you wish for tomorrow when this customer goes live that means you're going to renew them in 12 months' time? And when I ask that question, I'm looking really for like one main thing, but there's some sub things under there, like how do you handle with the pressure? Like that's a weird question. Did they deflect? Do they panic? Do they like take a moment to think it through? There's some stuff that you can kind of underpin there. But really what I'm looking for is, I don't want people to say, and I'm giving it away now, so I can't ask that question again. I don't want people to say things like, I hope that the app doesn't go down during my training session. Or I hope that all of the users turn up to the training that I'm running tomorrow, because that tells me that you've not understood the assignment. Like you don't know how to get this customer to that end point on that journey. What I'm looking for is people who say things like, well, what I want to do tomorrow is I want a board up on the wall that tracks every dollar of value they've got second by second from using the software. Or things like that air more on, I'm not going to give all the answers away because then everyone's going to repeat it back. But do you see what I'm saying? I'm testing for this like more old school, more like product-led CSM versus that like, how do I take you down this journey? And what are the things that matter to make you go change your behavior?
And thinking customer first as well.
Yeah.
Well, this will be a good test because if they repeat this answer, they've at least done their research. I don't know whether that's a pro or a con.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
One more question about this is you've obviously scaled these CS teams. So how do you make sure they stay efficient as you add more people?
That's a really good question. I think I'm big on like process. So I've always been a big process-led CS leader. And so there's pros and cons to that. Like I'm sure a lot of the teams that have worked for me would be like, hey, stop giving me so many KPIs because I know what I'm doing. But I think there's something about like creating a really good motion that works and running it. And so for the most part, as I think about scaling and bringing on new people, we've designed this motion that we think works really well. And we've designed frameworks and things that maps that we think work really well. And so the new person is encouraged to take that on. I think a really solid onboarding process. I don't know that I'm nailing that right now in my current role. So good feedback for myself. But I think, really good onboarding process. And then I think it's like just regularly reviewing and iterating. You can build a CS process that, if you think about the last 3 months in customer success, if I'd built a process 3 months ago, it would probably be out of date now, just with everything that AI can do for you. And so as you think about scale, as you think about like continuous improvement and continuous efficiency, as CS leaders, we have to constantly be evaluating, what are we doing? Is it the right thing? Is the motion I've created working for the different levels of customer? Do I need to tweak that? Do I need to change it? Because I think the world is just changing really, really quickly right now.
Well, I wanted to ask, because I saw that you recently ran a roundtable with Wiser about AI and CS.
Yeah.
How do you think it can really support CS in the future, or now, in fact?
Yeah, I was so surprised at how advanced CS teams are already in their use of AI.
Really?
So advanced.
That's so interesting, because I hear lots of people talking about it, but very few actually using it. So that's great to hear.
So that was one of the pieces of feedback from the roundtable, was their teams are using it sporadically, but there's no like nailed down process or workflow just yet. There's definite opportunity there, but a lot of people are playing with it. And I think I try and think about like categorizing things. I think there's definitely like a huge insight component. So like taking big pieces of data and leveraging AI to get insight out of it, or to build your QBR decks, or like we do with the machine learning. So like ingesting all of your data and turning it into an AI driven health score. So this ability to just take large amounts of data and leverage AI to quickly get insight from it. Huge time saver for a CSM, because part and parcel of your job is, how do I leverage this data to take my customer down a story or take them down a path? And then I think there's definitely an efficiency piece, like the rewriting of emails, the recording of all of your calls and turning it into a great follow-up with action items, like game changer for CSMs. And then I think that there's probably another piece on like strategy, planning, like that sort of thing, where there's a lot of funky stuff that you can do, leveraging AI to research your customers, building handovers, building out org charts and trying to figure out who are the people I need to speak to, who's my economic buyer, who's the champion, what do they care about. And so I think there's a lot in AI there that's going to elevate the world of a CSM. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see in the next 6 to 12 months, not only how technology advances to improve CSMs, but also how CSMs themselves have to upskill themselves on AI, because they'll be speaking to their customers about it all the time. But then which CSMs get on the bandwagon and which don't, because all of a sudden there's going to be this world where you don't have to do all of the busy work. You don't have to do all of the admin and all of the little things, because tech's going to do that for you. And so it'll be really interesting to see whether or not people step up and really embrace the technology to push themselves forward and elevate what they're doing. And I really hope so. I think it will be wonderful for our industry.
I think that adoption part is so key. One thing I wanted to ask is, I love when I look at your LinkedIn profile, you lead with mum, CS leader. How do you balance those two identities?
I don't know that I do a perfect job of balancing it. I don't know that I don't know that there's a parent out there that will say, yeah, I've got it nailed. I think being a mum always comes first. Like that has to be the first and the most important thing. And it's interesting because I think about like my leadership style and my strengths since being a parent, and I think that being a mum has made me better at my job and made me a better leader, because I think and not to say that people who aren't parents don't have this, but for me personally, it gave me better perspective on what matters and what doesn't matter. It definitely helped me think about like empathy and thinking about, where other people are at and why they think a certain way, and how do you get through to them. And so I think there's a lot about being a mum that has made me a better professional. But as far as balance, I think I try really hard to set boundaries. I can't. I'll have to hold my hands up. I don't always stick to the boundaries. I try really hard. And so I'm very much I'm going to set my working hours, and I will work as hard as I can in those working hours. And then outside of that is time for my family. And if I have to do bits and pieces when they've gone to bed or before they get up to be able to flex and do things, then I will do that. So for instance, yesterday was sports day. And so I was out for an hour in the middle of the morning. But that meant that I worked a little earlier this morning to catch up. And so I try really hard to set boundaries, but then flex it based on when my family need me, but also then maybe when work needs me a little bit more too.
Was there a parents' race yesterday?
There was, and I didn't get involved because I had an ankle injury about a year ago, which I know sounds really dramatic, but I'm not fully recovered, and quite a lot of parents slipped. So I'm kind of happy that I just stayed
that would
sitting
not
down
be
and
ideal
didn't get
to set
involved
yourself
in that.
backwards. Well done for avoiding. Last
Thanks.
question before we go on to our quick fire round. What's one piece of advice you would give to other CS leaders who are looking to scale their teams?
One of the big things that I have learned going from really big company to started a bit smaller, but grew really quickly at SalesLoft to much smaller company at Hook is in bigger companies, you're programmed to scale processes as quickly as possible. You're not necessarily programmed to go figure out perfection in that process before you scale it. And I think one of the biggest learnings for me coming to Hook is, hey, don't rush to scale. Like, it's okay to take a bit of time and figure out how you do this perfectly. And if that means your team going deeper, and if it means applying more resource to be able to do that, that's okay. Because then when you scale it, you're scaling something that really has worked rather than scaling something that maybe 80% worked or 60% worked. And so that's definitely been a huge learning for me here that I wish somebody had told me maybe when I was starting SalesLoft or I was building some of the teams there.
Great advice. So get it right first before you scale.
And it sounds simple, doesn't it? But
when you're under all of that pressure, it's so easy to let that go. It's like,
yeah.
I've got to keep going.
Yeah.
So just a few questions in our quick fire round.
Oh, yes.
So first of all, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in your career?
One of my old managers at SalesLoft, he said to me, run towards the fire. If there's a really big problem to solve, like, go run towards it, go solve it, because everybody else runs away and you'll be noticed for running to it. And so that's one of them. And then I think the other thing, one of my managers at LinkedIn used to say, progress beats perfection, because I used to be obsessed with perfecting things before I did anything. And so I think that that's a really lovely mantra, especially in CS, where nothing's ever perfect and nothing's ever finished. So yeah, progress beats perfection.
I love that first one as well. And that's come up a couple of times in how some of our female revenue leaders have progressed. It's by, I've gone towards that fire. There's a big, horrible problem and everyone else is like, no, thank you. And I say, right, I'm going to take this on. And that's really helped me progress. So I think that's great advice. What's one habit or routine that's helped you succeed?
I mean, I am just a crazy organizer. I think I am like one of those like calendar maniacs that blocks everything out on my calendar. It's definitely officially a part of my brand now where people are like, oh, your calendar. But I find it the only way. I think I'm quite militant on setting like big picture goals for my team, translating that into what do we need to do quarterly, what have we got to do each month, and then what does that mean for me for my week? And then on a Friday or a Monday, comparing like my calendar for the next couple of weeks ahead, does it match the things that are in my goals? And have I got time blocked out to go and execute on those things? And I time block everything because, you mentioned it about customer success. It doesn't change in leadership. There's so many things that you're balancing in so many things to do that the only way I find I can be successful is like really being very organized with my time.
I think in another life, you are the most phenomenal project manager as well.
I think I would be a great project manager.
What's one book or podcast you would recommend?
The first thing that springs to mind that's more customer success focused is I read The Effortless Experience. I forget who wrote it, but it's all about how you think about support teams and customer success teams and what matters and what doesn't matter in terms of what drives customer loyalty. And I found it really interesting how it talked about ease of working with you is one of the biggest factors. It's not whether you wow your customers. It's not all these other things that we get caught up in, but actually just what they want is like lack of friction when it comes to working with you.
How do you switch off after a busy day?
Yeah, other than having a glass of wine. Yeah. I think this is another area where I just don't think I've nailed it. I think I have a lot of room for improvement here. I don't think I have a consistent routine to switch off. And I think feedback for myself would be that probably I need one. I literally close my laptop, open one door here, and my children are there like bouncing around waiting for me. And we go straight into dinner. And I think having something that like helps me wind my brain down would probably be very beneficial for me. But maybe it's just that. Maybe it's like having dinner with my family, hanging out with my family. But I would love other people's tips on that, probably.
Well, we shall request them. And last question, which female leader in your network should we interview next?
I had lunch this week with some wonderful leaders and some wonderful female leaders, actually. And there was a lady there called Demelza Davies. She works at Vanta right now. I think she leads their EMEA customer success team. And I was really impressed with her and how she spoke about hiring, how she spoke about her team. And I think she would be a good person for you to bring onto the podcast.
All right, Demelza, if you're listening, we're coming to get you. Thank you so much for joining us, Natasha. Could keep talking for hours and really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning in to Scale Sessions. If you found today's insights valuable, be sure to subscribe and leave a review.
Stay connected for more no-nonsense advice to help you scale your business, drive revenue, and achieve your growth goals.